Hello everybody. Today we're taking a riverboat tour on the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee.
Three decks, you're free to roam around the vessel at any time. But while doing so, make sure you take your time, walk slowly, hold on to those handrails. Once you get upstairs, no standing on top of table backs, chairs, or railings. Now we want you to have a good time this afternoon, but just not quite that good of a time. If you're looking for the restrooms, you'll find those downstairs on the main deck. If you're facing that bar at the rear, you'll find the ladies' rooms to the rear to the right side of the bar. You'll find the men's rooms on the rear to the left. We built this vessel by hand as well as those two vessels that you see in the rear with those red paddle wheels. Now that one on the end is the Memphis Showboat. It was built back in 1964. The next one that you see with the red paddle wheel is the Memphis Queen 3. It was built back in 1979. By the way, anybody ever heard of an old song called Walking in Memphis? Most of the video for that song was shot aboard the Memphis Queen 3 over there. They also shot parts of Arkansas, Mississippi. You're only about 65 miles downriver from Missouri. So from the very start, the city of Memphis was a major riverport trade destination for commerce. We were a huge market for things like cotton, lumber, horses, and mules. And of course, in the 1800s, Memphis was also a major slave market. As a matter of fact, it was the biggest market in Tennessee. Now, at any time, there would be dozens of ships. Back in the mid-1850s up until about the early 1890s. They came from a rock quarry up in Illinois. Those stones were laid individually by hand. Now, the city of Memphis put those down to accommodate those ships in the loading and unloading of cargo and passengers. Now, as we're making our way along, this is the building that offered overnight cruises on the Mississippi River. You can start down in New Orleans and sail all the way up to St. Paul, Minnesota if you're so inclined. Now, lots of people are very curious about this spiral. They want to know what purpose it serves. Well, it attaches to that floating dock. That's how passengers load and unload when they get in at this particular destination. Unfortunately, the landing hasn't been used in about a year, so it's kind of up in the air as to what the future of it is going to be. Those crested that top level of that spiral got so high it overflowed on the Riverside Drive. Now, to give you an idea of how things can change, October of last year, the Mississippi River dropped down to the lowest recorded depth that's ever been in Memphis' 200-plus year history. We dropped down to almost a negative 12 feet below zero. Once again, to give you an idea, Tom worked for the city of Memphis for 20 years. He finally retired, lived about 12 years after retirement. He died of cancer back in 1952. In 1954, the city of Memphis decided they wanted to take their recognition of Tom Lee a little further. They renamed this park in his honor. This park used to be called Astor Park. They changed the name to Tom Lee Park in 54. If you look there to your left, there's a little bronze statue of Mr. Tom Lee. He's in that little small boat of his. He's got his hands stretched out. He's pulling survivors on stagecoach or a steam locomotive. Engineers decided they wanted to do something daring. They wanted to connect the east to the west with a freight line. Now that Frisco Bridge spans 4,887 feet long. Cost a whopping $3 million to build that bridge. Now that bridge is only about 30 feet wide. It's got one single railroad track running right down the middle of that structure. But it was also designed to be wide enough for a horse and a wagon to be driven across as well. This landmark is a place called Martyrs Park. Now if you recall, I told you Memphis was founded back in 1819. We had three founding fathers, John Overton, James Winchester, and Hugh Jackson. Now this is before Jackson became president of the United States. All three of these men have parts of the city as well as the state named in their honor. Now they took the name Memphis from a city in Egypt that also sat beside a mighty body of water. It sat beside the Nile River. Memphis translated roughly means good place to live, place of goodwill, place of good abode. For many years, the city of Memphis was a thriving, growing city, economically sound. Pretty much any endeavor that we undertook was prosperous in our direction. Seemed like nothing could stop our growth. That is until the year 1877 rolled around. City of Memphis got hit with a bout of yellow fever. In the span of only 1 year, yellow fever took the lives of more than 5,000 Memphians. 30,000 residents of the city just packed up their bags and moved out. They didn't want to get sick and die of yellow fever. That only left the city with a population of roughly about 20,000 people, and most of those were sick or dying. The result of that migration was so severe on our economy that the city of that arch designates a place called Martyrs Park. That park is there to commemorate and honor the sacrifices of all those brave individuals who gave so much to the city of Memphis during one of its darkest periods. By the way, while I'm on the subject of that, do I have any veterans on board, any first responders, anything like that? I see some hands. Let's give them a big round of applause, folks, to say bless you and thank you for your service. Okay, now, folks, we're winding our way on down the mighty Mississippi River, the 5th longest river in the world, one of the busiest rivers in America. The Mississippi River is 2,350 miles long. It snakes through 10 different states. I'm just curious, can somebody help me out with a little bit of information? Somebody tell me, where does the Mississippi River begin? And don't everybody get smart and say it to start. Anybody? Where does the Mississippi River begin? Now that's the other end, New Orleans the other end. Minnesota, close enough, Lake Itasca, Minnesota. The Mississippi River, the headwaters begin in Lake Itasca, Minnesota. Now where does the Mississippi River end? Gulf of Mexico, absolutely right, 2,350 miles long. Believe it or not, at the headwaters of the Mississippi River up in Lake Itasca, Minnesota, you could walk across a 20-foot section of the Mississippi River. The water will barely be deep enough to cover your ankles. It's just that narrow, just that shallow. Up there, the Mississippi River is more than 11 miles wide. The depths range anywhere from 15 feet up to 78 feet deep. Now, there are parts of the Mississippi River that can get up to 200 feet deep, but generally you'll find those kind of depths down around the Gulf of Mexico, down in the Louisiana area down there. But for all of its great length, on average, the Mississippi River is only between 9 to 12 feet deep. Now you're going to run into deeper pockets here and there as you go up and down to 2,350 miles, but the average is moving. Sandbars are always building up on the Mississippi. And as I said, the Corps of Engineers has to always make certain that there's 9 feet of clearance at all times for these river barges. Now, for about 1,500 miles on the lower end of the Mississippi River, you got more than 800 levees. On the northern end of the Mississippi, for about 850 miles, you've got 29 dams and river locks. Oh, by the way, folks, for those of you that took photographs when you boarded the vessel, if you'd like to purchase those photographs as souvenirs, my shipmate Rodney, he's going to bring those around there, $15. Wave your hand back there so they can see you, Rodney. Everybody say hi to Rodney. Now he's going to bring those photos around there, $15. If you decide that you want to purchase one, if you do decide to purchase one, Rodney won't mind one to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. The Mississippi River drops down more than 1,400 feet. Without those river locks on the northern end, it would be impossible for large vessels to go past a certain point on the Mississippi River. Now, a lock is a basin that has a huge door on both ends of it. They'll drive that vessel in that basin, close the door behind it. Once they close that door, they're going to either raise the water level in that chamber or lower the water traffic going into Arkansas, 2 lanes of automobile traffic going into Memphis. And that is actually the 3rd bridge that was built on the lower Mississippi here in Memphis. Now let's talk about that one in the middle for just a moment. That's the one pretty much secured the funding for that bridge. Now that bridge opened up back in 1892. Before that bridge was there, the only way to cross the river here in Memphis was by a steamboat, a river ferry, a river barge, a raft, or a canoe. Now, there were no automobiles in the late 1800s. If you're traveling by Frisco Bridge, that is the second oldest bridge on the lower end of the Mississippi River. Second only to the Eads Bridge up in St. Louis. For many years, the Frisco Bridge here in Memphis and the Eads Bridge in St. Louis were the only two bridges to cross the lower part of the Mississippi between here and the Gulf of Mexico, almost 800 miles. But once again, that is our historic Frisco Bridge, still in service. It's got one railroad track running down the middle of it. The Harahan Bridge has two railroad tracks running down the center of it. But the Harahan Bridge also took into consideration that cars and trucks needed to cross the river as well. Now, as we go on to this third bridge, I want you to notice these steel beams that are sticking out on the side. Now, they stick out on both sides of the bridge. That is how cars and trucks had to cross the river in single file from 1916 up until 1949. Now, the only thing about that was in 1916, the only thing that were covering those steel beams were wooden planks. There was no asphalt. Cars and trucks went by on a wooden plank runway. And those are our three bridges on the lower Mississippi. Our first one is the one in the middle, the Frisco Bridge, 1892. Our second bridge, the Harahan Bridge, 1916. And our third bridge, the Tennessee-Arkansas, or the I-55 Bridge, 1949. They only support railroad traffic. But I also might add that the Harahan Bridge has been turned into the Big River Crossing. If you would like to jog across the river or walk across, it happened on the north side of Memphis, about a mile and a half from where we are right now, just on the other side of that pyramid. Now, this was strictly a naval battle. Now, there was no foot infantry. Memphis was under Confederate rule because Tennessee was a Confederate state. This particular morning, 9 Union Navy ships met up against 8 Confederate ships. The battle started at about dawn and went to about noon. Thousands of people from Memphis just stood on the banks and watched it as it took place. When it was all said and done, the Union Army had sunk all of those Confederate ships except for one. They estimate that somewhere between 200 to 250 men were either killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. And at that time, the city wasn't the Love Boat. It was a ship called the Sultana, deadliest shipping disaster in the history of the United States. I mentioned the Titanic. Let's kind of use that as a point of reference. Most people have heard about the Titanic and they're kind of familiar with it to some degree. The Titanic went down back in 1912. When it went down, it took more than almost 1,300 people to the bottom with it. The Sultana took down more people than that, folks. So let's talk about the Sultana for a moment. Let's go back to April 27, 1865. Now, the Civil War had recently been over. It had been over for about maybe 2-3 weeks. The Sultana was a large 3-level steamship. Now, this ship was powered by 4 big boilers. It was a side paddle ship. By that I mean the Sultana left Vicksburg, Mississippi. They left Louisiana. They made their way into Vicksburg, Mississippi. Once in Vicksburg, maybe 20 to 30 people decide they're just going to stay they're just going to stay right there in Helena, Arkansas. Captain Mason comes on into Memphis, Tennessee. Once in Memphis, another 10, maybe 12 people decide that they're just going to stay 40 right here in Memphis. Captain Mason takes on a few supplies. He pulls out early that morning, shortly after 3 o'clock a.m. Makes it about maybe 6-7 miles out of Memphis, up around Marion, Arkansas. That boiler blows up. It causes a chain reaction. The Sultana, they say, went up like a bomb. When it was all said and done, they estimate that somewhere between 1,700 to 1,800 people lost their lives that morning. The deadliest shipping disaster in the history of the United States happened about maybe 6-7 miles upriver from where we are right now. They said that there were bodies floating in the Mississippi River for months after that. They were finding bodies from the Sultana being pulled out the river as far away as Vicksburg, Mississippi. Now, history doesn't talk a whole lot about the Sultana. Most people tend to think that, for one thing, it happened right after the Civil War. People were still pretty known from all the years that the Civil War had brought about. Abe Lincoln had recently been assassinated. The whole country was looking for his assassination. Through the heartland of America, passes through 10 different states. It sweeps along everything in its path. Sand, soot, gravel, mud, clay, pesticides from farming communities, the waste from farming communities, dead plants, dead trees, the carcasses of dead animals. All of those things contribute to the wastewater, and bull sharks have been seen as far north as of around Illinois. There are alligators in the Mississippi River. The further south you go, the more alligators you're going to run into. Do we have alligators in the Memphis area? Yes, we do. We do have alligators in the Memphis area. People want to know, can you swim in the Mississippi River? Most people will tell you that would not be a smart thing to try, folks. That current runs along 1 to 3 miles an hour. That's a pretty strong current. That's just the top current. You've got a dangerous undercurrent out there that can easily catch you up, pull you down. In addition to that, there's always trash floating in the Mississippi, rocks and tree limbs. Any of that could hit you and harm you. And if that's not enough to stop you, there are dangerous animals out there. In addition to a bull shark or an alligator, the Mississippi River is full of dangerous snakes, water moccasins, cottonmouths, rattlers, diamondbacks, coral snakes. So all of those are out there. The brim, the perch, the crappie, the carp, the sturgeons, the saugers, the alligator gars, the snapping turtles. The biggest fish caught in this area was a 133-pound blue catfish. I think they caught it right on the other side of the Tennessee-Arkansas bridge, 3 Guys, Sumerian, Arkansas. People look over there on the Memphis side. Now that flood killed about 350 people, displaced about 250,000 people from their homes and jobs. Most of the devastation from that flood was on the lower end of the Mississippi, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We had the highest water mark we've ever had back in 1937. Now that flood got up to 48 feet, 0.7 inches. That's the high that the water has ever been in Memphis. Of course, we got close back in 2011. We got up to 47 feet, 8 inches. And those are the 4 major floods that we've had in the Memphis area. I'm going to send a birthday shout. I want to say happy birthday to Corey. Let's give Corey a big old happy birthday. All right. There's a park in his honor on the corner of Beale and Rufus Thomas. And they got a little small museum in his honor on the corner of Beale and Fort. Memphis can also brag about having the song that the Guinness Book of World Records considers to be the first rock and roll song ever recorded. It was recorded right here in Memphis at Sun Studios back in 1951. Does anybody know what that song was? Anybody know who did that song? Yes, sir. It was Ike Turner. You know the name of that song? Yes, sir. You're right on the money. Occasion. It was Ike Turner. This was before he met Tina back in 1951. Ike Turner was a young session musician at Sun Studios. He wrote a tune called Rocket 88. Now, there was a song about a popular Oldsmobile sports car of the day. The Guinness Book of World Records calls that the first rock and roll song because that was the first time that a guitar was recorded intentionally with overdrive on it to give it that upfront tone to be associated with rock and roll. Now, Ike Turner wrote that song. He played piano on the recording of that song. The vocalist was a guy by the name of Jackie Brewster, who, by the way, was Ike Turner's saxophone player in his band, the Rhythm Kings. Now, you can say lightning struck twice here in Memphis at Sun Studios. Rocket 88 was considered the birth of rock and roll by the Guinness Book of Records in the world in 1951. But something also happened in 1954 that forever changed the course of rock and roll. Let's go back to 1953. Sun Studios has a little promotional gimmick going on where everyday ordinary people can come in off the street and make a record for about $3.50, which was about like $40 then. A young truck driver comes in, he makes a record for his mother. He records a song called My Happiness. Now this young truck driver left such an impression on Sam Phillips. He has his guys to go bring this guy in a year later. He records a couple of songs. One of those songs ends up being The Big Bang in Rock and Roll. Does anybody know what that song was and who did it? It was Elvis. Do we know the name of the song? It was a song called That's All Right Mama. Now that song was originally written and recorded back in 1949 River every year. 28% of all the petroleum products that leave the country go by barge, 20% of coal, and 68% of agriculture products. Now the barge is the thing that's being pushed. The thing that's pushing the barge is a towboat. They push from the rear rather than pull from the front because it's more efficient that way. Those vessels move up and down the river at 5 miles an hour. Everything on the river has to yield the right of way to those vessels. Because when you're pushing that kind of weight, you can't stop quickly and you can't maneuver quickly. Now we're going to take a little break for commentary, folks. I'm going down to the bandstand. I'm going to crank up the jukebox, play a little music for you. If there's something that you'd like. There you have it, the first blues song published right here in Memphis. W.C. Hand is Memphis Blues. Now that version was Robinson Louis Armstrong. Let's go back to 1951. That song considered by the Guinness Book of World Records to be the first rock and roll song ever recorded. Ike Turner's Rockin' 88. Recorded right here in Memphis. Looks like the Wi-Fi is trying to act up a little bit here. Try that. There we go. Let's see if we can do a little reeling and rocking with Ike. Mr. Ryder, if you get back by, come by and leave a little knowledge with me. Here's a little something about the righteous Reverend Al Green. Let's stay together. I got after 40 years, you might as well say you did. Miss Soul. Here's an old song that was written by Isaac Hayes and David Porter, song by Sam and Dave. I'm a soul man.
Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.